Blood trickled down Jasmine Wilson's wrists as the handcuffs dug deeper. The decorated black Marine sniper stood silent before Judge Harrington when the courtroom doors burst open. General Marcus Coleman, 4 stars gleaming, approached the bench. "Your Honor, this entire case is built on prejudice and lies. Before we dive into this shocking story of injustice and redemption, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you believe our veterans deserve better treatment, and subscribe to join our community, fighting for justice." Now, let's rewind to see how a decorated Marine sniper found herself in handcuffs for simply helping an elderly woman. The morning had started like any other for Jasmine Wilson. The 38-year-old former Marine sniper was passing through Oakwood Springs, Georgia, a small town with deep racial tensions bubbling beneath its picturesque surface. She had stopped at the local grocery store for coffee when she noticed elderly Mrs. Abernathy, an 84-year-old white woman, stumble and fall near the entrance. Without hesitation, Jasmine rushed to help, gently supporting the woman and checking for injuries. Mrs. Abernathy gratefully clutched Jasmine's arm as they waited for the store manager to bring a first aid kit. That's when Sheriff Derek Reynolds and 2 deputies screeched into the parking lot, responding to a disturbance call. The moment Sheriff Reynolds spotted Jasmine, a tall, athletic black woman, holding on to Mrs. Abernathy, his hand moved to his weapon. "Step away from her now," he barked, despite Mrs. Abernathy's confused protests. "Officer, this kind lady was helping me after I fell," Mrs. Abernathy explained, her voice trembling. Sheriff Reynolds ignored her completely. "I said step away." When Jasmine calmly complied, raising her hands slightly, the sheriff nodded to his deputies. They rushed forward, slamming Jasmine against the wall. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs as they wrenched her arms behind her back. "I'm not resisting," Jasmine stated clearly, her military training kicking in. She knew how these situations could escalate. One deputy pressed his knee into her back, while another secured the handcuffs so tightly they immediately broke skin. "Got ourselves a troublemaker," Sheriff Reynolds smirked, noticing the military dog tags hanging from Jasmine's neck. He dangled them mockingly in front of her face. "Playing soldier, are we?" Jasmine remained silent, her eyes forward, body rigid, with the discipline that had carried her through 3 tours in Afghanistan. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured. "My military ID is in my wallet, sir. I'm a former Marine sniper, honorably discharged." This only seemed to anger the sheriff more. "Sure you are," he scoffed. "And I'm the Secretary of Defense." The small crowd gathering outside the store murmured in concern. Several had phones out, recording the incident. "She was just helping that old lady," someone called out. Sheriff Reynolds turned to the crowd. "Her official police business. Move along unless you want to join her." As they loaded Jasmine into the squad car, Mrs. Abernathy hobbled forward. "This is outrageous. She helped me when I fell. There's been a terrible mistake." The deputies physically blocked the elderly woman from approaching. Later, at the station, Jasmine would learn that her official charges included assault, robbery, and resisting arrest, all completely fabricated. Her military ID and credentials mysteriously disappeared during processing. "Body cam malfunction," explained Deputy Scott Thomas with a smirk when Jasmine asked about video evidence. "Bad timing." "Huh?" The booking sergeant set bail at $50,000, an astronomical amount for the alleged offenses. "Judge Harrington's orders," he explained with a shrug that suggested this was routine for certain defendants. Jasmine's first night in Oakwood Springs Detention Center was a masterclass in systematic humiliation. Guards accidentally spilled water on her mattress, refused medical attention for her bleeding wrists, and placed her in isolation for her own protection. Through it all, Jasmine maintained her composure, her mind analyzing patterns and collecting information. She noticed other black inmates received similar treatment: medication delayed, phone calls denied, mail lost. Many were passing through, town like her when arrested for minor or non-existent infractions. In her cold cell, Jasmine closed her eyes and recalled her military career, the discipline of sniper training, the focus required to remain motionless for 18 hours in the Afghan mountains, the precision of her record-breaking shots that had saved American lives. Those skills had earned her numerous commendations and the respect of her unit. Now in a small-town jail cell, those same skills, patience, observation, strategic thinking, would serve a different purpose. As darkness fell over Oakwood Springs, Jasmine made a silent vow. This wasn't just about her wrongful arrest anymore. The systematic patterns she observed pointed to something much larger, something deeply embedded in Oakwood Springs' power structure. By morning, she had mentally catalogued every procedural violation, every discriminatory action, every piece of evidence she would need. Jasmine Wilson might have been caught in Oakwood Springs' web of injustice, but they had no idea they had, just tangled with a Marine trained to observe, adapt, and overcome. The town's history of racial profiling and convenient arrests of black residents passing through was about to face its most formidable opponent yet. Marcus Jackson adjusted his tie nervously as he reviewed Jasmine Wilson's case file. At 29, he was the newest public defender in the county, typically handling minor offenses and plea bargains. The charges against Jasmine seemed straightforward. On paper, another alleged troublemaker passing through Oakwood Springs who'd have to pay fines or serve time. "Ms. Wilson, I'm Marcus Jackson, your court-appointed attorney," he introduced himself in the jailhouse consultation room. Jasmine sat perfectly straight, her posture military precise despite the orange jumpsuit. Her eyes, sharp and evaluating, made Marcus feel like he was being tactically assessed. "They've offered a plea deal," he began, shuffling papers. 6 months with potential parole after—" "I'm not taking a plea," Jasmine interrupted, voice calm but firm. "I didn't commit any crime. I was helping an elderly woman who fell." Marcus sighed. He'd heard similar protests from countless defendants. "Look, with your record—" "My record includes 3 tours in Afghanistan as a Marine sniper, with 32 confirmed missions protecting American forces. I've received the Bronze Star and numerous commendations for bravery under fire. I understand tactical situations, Mr. Jackson, and I recognize a railroading when I see one." The young lawyer froze, papers halfway to his briefcase. "You're military?" Jasmine's eyes never wavered. 17 years honorably discharged. My credentials mysteriously disappeared during booking. The sheriff seemed particularly amused by my dog tags. Marcus set his briefcase aside, suddenly paying much closer attention. "Tell me everything," he said. For the next hour, Jasmine methodically detailed the events, her military background and the pattern of abuse she'd observed in just 24 hours of incarceration. Marcus took furious notes, his initial resignation transforming into focused determination. "This isn't just about me," Jasmine concluded. "There's a pattern here. 3 other inmates, all black, all passing through town, arrested on suspicious charges. All pressured to accept plea deals rather than fight charges that wouldn't hold up in a fair court." The next day, Marcus filed a Freedom of Information Act request for the body cam footage. The response came back, claiming technical malfunction. But through a contact in the clerk's office, he obtained partial footage, showing Jasmine clearly complying with officers, while Mrs. Abernathy protested in the background. His investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Oakwood Springs Sheriff's Department received federal funding based on arrest and conviction rates. More arrests, more money. Black travelers passing through town were perfect targets. Unlikely to stay and fight charges, pressured into plea deals that counted as convictions. When Marcus visited Mrs. Abernathy to get her statement, the elderly woman appeared frightened. "I'd like to help, but those officers came by yesterday. Said I might be confused about what happened, that I should trust their report since I'm getting on in years. My son tells me not to get involved." Despite this setback, Marcus persisted, discovering that when Jasmine refused to accept the plea deal, Sheriff Reynolds personally added charges to her case. "They're painting you as dangerous now," Marcus explained during their next meeting. "Using your military background against you, calling you unstable, potentially violent." Jasmine nodded, unsurprised. "They searched my military background. Someone did. Your personnel file was accessed by unknown parties. They're specifically focusing on your sniper training in their narrative." As Marcus left the consultation room, he found a note tucked under his windshield wiper. "Drop the Wilson case if you know what's good for you." That same night, his office was spray-painted with racial slurs. Meanwhile, Jasmine had begun documenting the jail's pattern of abuse through coded messages passed to Marcus, guard schedules, inmate treatment disparities, medical neglect patterns. The local news ran a segment on Jasmine's case describing her as a potentially unstable military veteran with specialized killing training who attacked an elderly woman. No mention was made of Mrs. Abernathy's initial protests or the lack of evidence. As tensions escalated, Marcus discovered an unexpected ally, Deputy Lisa Carter, a recent transfer to the department who secretly disagreed with the tactics she witnessed. "This isn't what I signed up for," she confided during a clandestine meeting in the courthouse parking garage. "Reynolds has quotas for arrests, specifically targeting people of color passing through town. Mrs. Abernathy was threatened. They told her they'd investigate her grandson's business if she didn't remember correctly." The more Marcus dug, the more disturbing the pattern became. Oakwood Springs had a history of arrests that followed a specific profile. Primarily, black visitors stopped for minor infractions that escalated to serious charges when contested. Those who accepted plea deals paid substantial fines that flowed directly to county coffers. Those who fought the charges faced an uphill battle against a stacked system. "They're accelerating your case timeline," Marcus informed Jasmine during their next meeting. "Judge Harrington denied our standard motions for discovery and bail reduction. He and Reynolds go way back, fishing buddies." Jasmine absorbed this information with the calm calculation of a trained tactician. "Then we need to change the battlefield," she replied. "Military Strategy 101. When outmaneuvered, bring in reinforcements and attack from an unexpected direction." Marcus leaned forward, intrigued despite his growing fear. "What did you have in mind?" Jasmine's eyes, steady and determined, met his. "It's time to activate my network. There are people who know exactly who I am and what I've done for this country. People who won't stand by while a decorated Marine is framed by a corrupt sheriff." As Marcus left the detention center that evening, he didn't notice the black SUV parked across the street, or the man inside watching the facility with military-grade binoculars. The battle for justice in Oakwood Springs was about to escalate, in ways Sheriff Reynolds and Judge Harrington could never anticipate. Trevor Washington scrolled through his social media feed when the blurry video stopped his thumb cold. Despite the poor quality, he instantly recognized the composed black woman being pressed against a police cruiser. "Holy shit, that's Whisper," he muttered, using Jasmine Wilson's call sign from their days in Afghanistan. Within minutes, he was downloading the video, enhancing the footage, and placing a secure call to Colonel Patricia Davis. "Ma'am, we have a situation with Whisper," he reported, military formality returning instantly despite being 5 years removed from active duty. "She's been arrested in some backwater town under suspicious circumstances." Colonel Davis's response was immediate. "Send me everything you have, I'll make some calls." Across the country, in a Pentagon office decorated with campaign medals and unit photographs, Colonel Davis reviewed the footage with growing concern. Jasmine Wilson had been under her command for 2 of the most critical missions in recent military history. Her record was impeccable, her judgment beyond reproach. If Jasmine was in custody, something was deeply wrong. She dialed Marcus Jackson's office number, obtained through military channels. "Mr. Jackson, this is Colonel Patricia Davis, United States Marine Corps. I understand you're representing Jasmine Wilson. We need to talk." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. "Colonel, Yes, of course. Ms. Wilson served under my command for 6 years. During that time, she participated in classified operations that saved numerous American lives. Whatever she's being accused of, I can personally vouch for her character and integrity." The conversation that followed changed everything. Colonel Davis explained Jasmine's distinguished service record, including details of a classified mission that had prevented a major terrorist attack. By the time they finished speaking, Marcus realized he wasn't just defending an individual, he was fighting for someone who had repeatedly put her life on the line for her country. Meanwhile, Sheriff Reynolds discovered the military's interest in his prisoner. "Push up the arraignment," he instructed the prosecutor. "I want this wrapped up before the jarheads start making noise." Judge Harrington complied, scheduling proceedings at an accelerated pace and denying standard motions that would have given the defense time to prepare. Across town, Trevor Washington had established a secure chat group with 15 former members of their unit. "Whisper needs us," was all he had to say. Veterans from across the country began making travel arrangements to Oakwood Springs. Investigative. Journalist Eliza Chen, known for her exposés on corruption, received an anonymous tip about Jasmine's case. "Look into Oakwood Springs arrest patterns by race," the message suggested, along with data showing statistical anomalies in the town's justice system. Her preliminary research revealed disturbing patterns. Black travelers through Oakwood Springs were 7 times more likely to be arrested than white travelers, with charges that frequently fell apart if challenged, but most couldn't afford to stay and fight. While these developments unfolded, Jasmine faced increasing harassment in detention. Phone privileges were revoked for security reasons. Meals arrived cold or not at all. Guards conducted middle-of-the-night inspections that prevented sleep. Through it all, Jasmine maintained her composure, using marine survival training to endure physical discomfort while documenting every violation. She observed other inmates receiving similar treatment based on race, gathering intelligence for what she now viewed as a mission. "Do you believe our justice system treats veterans with the respect they deserve after their service?" Comment number 1 if you think veterans should receive fair treatment regardless of race, and hit that like button if you're outraged by what's happening to Jasmine. Subscribe to follow this story to its conclusion, because what happens next will shake the foundations of an entire town's corrupt system. Could you remain as composed as Jasmine while facing such blatant injustice? How far would powerful people go to protect their corrupt system when challenged by someone with Jasmine's training and connections? Let's find out as this shocking story continues. Back in Washington, Colonel Davis briefed General Marcus Coleman on the situation. The 4-star general, known for his zero-tolerance policy on discrimination within the ranks, listened intently. "You're certain about Wilson's record?" he asked when she finished. "Absolutely, sir, one of our finest. The mission in Kandahar alone." "Say no more." The general tapped his desk decisively. "Make the calls. I want everything we legally can have on this situation. And Patricia? Sir, if what you're telling me is accurate, I'll handle this personally." As these wheels turned, Marcus Jackson's law office was broken into, case files stolen, computer hacked. The message was clear. Powerful people wanted this case to go away. Sheriff Reynolds personally visited the prosecutor's office. "I don't care what you have to do. Maximum charges, maximum sentence, make an example." Meanwhile, Mrs. Abernathy's grandson, Michael, approached Marcus secretly. "My grandmother is torn up about this. She says that woman was helping her, and now she's in jail for it. The deputies threatened to investigate my business if she didn't remember things their way." I recorded our conversation. This crucial piece of evidence coincided with Colonel Davis's discovery that Sheriff Reynolds had been dishonorably discharged from the military 20 years earlier for racial harassment of fellow soldiers, a fact conspicuously absent from his official biography. Inside the detention center, Jasmine maintained her physical conditioning despite limited space and resources. Push-ups, core exercises, mental mathematics, meditation, all techniques from survival training that kept her sharp and focused. She knew from experience that maintaining physical discipline supported mental resilience. The evening before her arraignment, Deputy Lisa Carter slipped her a note. "They're pushing for maximum sentencing. Judge already on board. Military looking into case. Hold strong." Jasmine folded the paper methodically, her face revealing nothing. In her mind, she was formulating a battle plan worthy of her training, one that would expose not just her own false arrest, but an entire system designed to profit from injustice. As dawn broke over Oakwood Springs, players from across the country were converging on the small town. Military veterans, investigative journalists, federal officials. Alerted by unusual patterns, Sheriff Reynolds had no idea that his routine frame-up of a black traveler had inadvertently targeted someone with the training, connections, and unbreakable discipline to bring his entire operation crashing down. The arraignment was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. By 8 a.m., the first veterans had already taken positions outside the courthouse, standing at parade rest in silent support. Inside her cell, Jasmine Wilson prepared herself mentally for battle, not with weapons but with the truth. The small town of Oakwood Springs was about to learn a painful lesson about targeting a Marine sniper trained to identify targets and never, ever miss. The preliminary hearing began with prosecutor William Bennett portraying Jasmine as a ticking time bomb. "Your Honor, the defendant's military background makes her particularly dangerous," he argued, pacing before Judge Harrington with practiced concern. "Her sniper training represents a clear threat to our community." Marcus objected immediately. "The prosecution is using my client's honorable service to her country to prejudice the court." Judge Harrington waved him off dismissively. "Overruled. The court needs to understand the full context of the defendant's background." This set the tone for the entire proceeding. Bennett introduced Dr. Raymond Phillips, a specialist in veteran psychology who had never actually treated Jasmine. "PTSD makes veterans unpredictable, prone to violent outbursts," Phillips testified, making sweeping generalizations that made Marcus's blood boil. When Marcus attempted to cross-examine the witness about his qualifications and lack of direct knowledge, Judge Harrington repeatedly limited his questions. "Move along, counselor. The court's time is valuable." Sheriff Reynolds took the stand next, his uniform freshly pressed, badge gleaming. He described responding to a disturbance call and finding the defendant physically restraining an elderly woman. His testimony was laced with subtle racist language, describing Jasmine as aggressive, intimidating, refusing to comply, dog whistles that painted a picture completely at odds with the partial body cam footage Marcus had obtained. When Marcus tried to introduce this contradictory evidence, Judge Harrington deemed it potentially altered and inadmissible. Mrs. Abernathy's testimony came next. The elderly woman appeared nervous, eyes darting to Sheriff Reynolds repeatedly. "I remember falling," she stated hesitantly. "Everything after that is unclear. I'm 84, you know. Memory isn't what it used to be." When Marcus gently reminded her of her initial protests at the scene, Bennett objected on grounds of badgering an elderly witness, which Harrington immediately sustained. Outside the courthouse, the situation was evolving rapidly. Local news. Crews captured the growing number of military veterans standing in silent formation. Social media exploded with partial videos of Jasmine's arrest, creating competing narratives. The community divided sharply, many residents backing their sheriff, while others, particularly people of color, held signs demanding justice. Inside the detention center, Jasmine appeared in court for the first time since her arrest. Her orange jumpsuit couldn't hide the military precision of her posture, the intelligence in her eyes, or the visible injuries on her wrists from overly tight handcuffs. Photos of her condition spread online, fueling public outrage and raising questions about treatment of detainees. The afternoon brought a surprise development when Deputy Lisa Carter approached Marcus during a recess. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Reynolds has a playbook for arrests like this. Black person passing through town, trumped-up charges, pressure for a plea deal, department gets the funding boost. I have documentation, detention records showing racial disparities, arrest quotas by race, everything." "Why come forward now?" Marcus asked. Deputy Carter's eyes hardened. "I became an officer to protect people. What they're doing to Ms. Wilson and dozens before her, that's not justice, that's organized racism for profit." Her evidence revealed systematic racial profiling extending back years. Marcus immediately filed new motions based on this information, which Judge Harrington predictably denied, but the documentation made its way to Eliza Chen, whose initial article on Oakwood Springs arrest patterns was gaining national attention. As the hearing continued, Sheriff Reynolds' deputies provided suspiciously identical testimony about Jasmine's aggressive resistance and threatening posture. Marcus methodically highlighted inconsistencies between their accounts, though Judge Harrington repeatedly sustained objections limiting this line of questioning. The prosecution presented their edited body cam footage, showing only the moment Jasmine stood near Mrs. Abernathy, conveniently cutting before and after to remove context. Technical expert James Norton testified that the remaining footage was corrupted and unrecoverable, a claim Marcus knew to be false based on expert consultation. The prosecution rested their case with Bennett, dramatically warning, "This trained military killer represents an ongoing threat to Oakwood Springs. We request continued detention and accelerated trial proceedings." Judge Harrington nodded in agreement before Marcus could even respond. "So ordered. Trial to begin next Monday." This unprecedented acceleration of proceedings violated standard judicial practice. But Harrington's courtroom operated by its own rules. Outside, the crowd had grown. Trevor Washington had organized veterans to attend in rotating shifts, their silent, disciplined presence a stark contrast to the chaotic atmosphere. Media coverage remained mixed. Local stations portrayed Jasmine as dangerous, while national outlets began questioning the unusual speed and irregularities of the proceedings. That evening, Colonel Davis secured high-profile military attorney Sofia Rodriguez to assist Marcus. With experience in both military and civilian courts, Rodriguez arrived in Oakwood Springs like a hurricane, immediately filing emergency motions, with higher courts citing judicial misconduct and civil rights violations. Meanwhile, Jasmine maintained her disciplined silence in detention, gathering information and building relationships with other inmates experiencing similar injustices. Her military training had taught her to observe, adapt, and wait for the strategic moment to act. She documented guard schedules, procedural violations, and witnessed 3 more questionable arrests of black travelers passing through town, all following the same pattern she had experienced. As the courthouse lights dimmed that evening, Judge Harrington and Sheriff Reynolds met privately at the Oakwood Springs Country Club. "This is getting out of hand," the judge muttered, swirling his bourbon. "Military lawyers, media attention. Not what we need." Sheriff Reynolds shrugged. "We've handled troublemakers before. By the time anyone important starts asking questions, she'll be serving time and will have moved on." Neither man noticed the photographer discreetly capturing their meeting from across the room. A photographer working for Eliza Chen, whose investigation was uncovering financial connections between arrests, convictions, and county funding. That painted a damning picture of institutionalized corruption. As dawn broke on Oakwood Springs the next day, Jasmine was moved to a higher security section of the detention center, officially for her protection, but actually to limit her communication with other inmates and her legal team. The sheriff's department was closing ranks, accelerating their timeline, eliminating evidence. What they failed to understand was that they were using predictable tactics against someone trained to anticipate enemy movements and develop countermeasures. Jasmine Wilson had spent her military career outthinking opponents in life-or-death situations. For her, this was just another battlefield with different weapons, and reinforcements were coming. In his Washington office, General Marcus Coleman reviewed Jasmine Wilson's classified service record with growing outrage. The thick folder contained mission reports, commendations, and performance evaluations, painting a picture of exceptional courage, integrity, and judgment. He paused at a particular photograph, Jasmine receiving the Bronze Star for a classified operation that had saved an entire unit from ambush. The contrast between this decorated Marine and the dangerous criminal portrayed in Oakwood Springs couldn't be more stark. "Get me everything on this case," he ordered his aide. "Everything legal, everything proper, but everything." Across town, military attorney Sofia Rodriguez joined Marcus Jackson at his makeshift war room, his small law office now wallpapered with timelines, witness statements, and evidence logs. "This isn't just a bad arrest," Rodriguez observed, scanning the materials. "This is systematic corruption using racial profiling for financial gain," Marcus nodded grimly. "The sheriff's department receives federal funding based on arrest and conviction rates. More arrests, more money. Travelers passing through town, especially black travelers, are perfect targets. Most can't afford to stay and fight charges." "But they picked the wrong target this time," Rodriguez replied, tapping Jasmine's service photo. "A Marine with an impeccable record and strategic training." Meanwhile, Eliza Chen published her first major article on Oakwood Springs' justice system. The piece methodically outlined statistical anomalies. Black travelers were 7 times more likely to be arrested than white travelers. Charges against black defendants were 3 times more likely to be elevated from misdemeanors to felonies. Bail amounts averaged 60% higher for black defendants with identical charges. The article stopped short of making direct accusations, instead letting the numbers speak for themselves. The story gained immediate traction, drawing attention from regional FBI offices already monitoring civil rights concerns in several southern jurisdictions. As pressure mounted publicly, an anonymous source delivered a bombshell to Marcus. Financial records showing Sheriff Reynolds had offshore accounts receiving regular deposits that correlated with arrest statistics. The timing suggested a kickback scheme potentially involving the private detention contractor operating Oakwood Springs jail facilities. Deputy Lisa Carter provided key evidence at tremendous personal risk, including internal memos outlining unofficial quotas for arrests and the department's focus on out-of-town travelers unlikely to contest charges. They call it fishing for passes, she explained, voice trembling with suppressed anger. Reynolds jokes about it during briefings, casting nets where the big fish travel through. Working late into the night, Marcus discovered Judge Harrington had dismissed similar charges against white defendants in 17 cases over the past year, often citing insufficient evidence or procedural errors, while maintaining a 97% conviction rate for black defendants. The pattern was unmistakable once assembled. Technical expert Amir Khoury, brought in by Rodriguez, recovered deleted portions of bodycam footage the sheriff's department claimed was corrupted. The restored video clearly showed Jasmine calmly complying with officers, while Mrs. Abernathy repeatedly protested, "She was helping me, why are you arresting her?" The following morning, Mrs. Abernathy was admitted to Oakwood Springs Memorial Hospital after suffering stress-induced heart palpitations. Her family blamed the sheriff's department's pressure tactics for her deteriorating health. While medical staff stabilized the elderly woman, her grandson Michael provided Marcus with recorded conversations between his grandmother and deputies who had visited to help her remember correctly what happened. The recordings revealed clear intimidation, with thinly veiled threats against her grandson's business if she didn't cooperate. General Coleman, working through proper channels, activated limited military intelligence resources to legally analyze public records regarding Oakwood Springs' justice system. The resulting report identified concerning patterns potentially violating federal civil rights statutes. He scheduled an urgent meeting with the state's governor to discuss the situation. Inside detention, Jasmine developed strategies to protect vulnerable inmates from guard retaliation. Using her training in psychological operations, she created diversions when guards targeted specific individuals, organized informal support networks, and documented systematic abuses through a coded communication system passed through trustworthy staff members. Death threats against Marcus escalated. Dead animals left on his porch, car windows smashed, racial slurs painted on his apartment door. Despite Rodriguez's urging to accept protection, he refused to be intimidated. "If Jasmine can endure what she's going through, I can handle this," he insisted. Sheriff Reynolds, realizing the case was attracting unwanted attention, attempted to transfer Jasmine to a high-security state facility 3 counties away, ostensibly for security concerns, but actually to limit her access to legal representation and supportive veterans gathering outside the local detention center. Rodriguez immediately obtained an emergency court order blocking the transfer, citing constitutional rights to counsel. The legal team's investigation uncovered disturbing financial connections between Judge Harrington, Sheriff Reynolds, and Oakwood Detention Partners, the private prison contractor operating the county's facilities. All 3 parties benefited from high arrest and conviction rates, the sheriff through department funding, the judge through political donations from the contractor, and the private prison through per-prisoner payments from county and federal sources. Trevor Washington located 3 other black veterans previously arrested under similar circumstances in Oakwood Springs. All described identical patterns: minor or non-existent infractions escalated to serious charges, pressure to accept plea, deals and threats of maximum sentences if they contested the charges. 2 had accepted pleas to get it over with. The 3rd had fought the charges only to have key evidence disappear before trial. Rodriguez systematically dismantled the prosecution's expert witnesses' credentials, discovering Dr. Phillips had been discredited in 2 previous cases for presenting opinions without scientific basis and had financial ties to companies providing rehabilitation services to the very detention system holding Jasmine. As preparations for trial intensified, General Coleman's meeting with the governor yielded results. A state-level inquiry into Oakwood Springs' arrest patterns was initiated, adding another layer of scrutiny to the increasingly exposed system. Throughout these developments, Jasmine maintained her strategic focus, refusing special treatment while insisting on exposing the broader systemic issues. "This isn't just about me," she told Marcus during a consultation. "It's about every person who doesn't have my training, my connections, or my resources, who's been chewed up by this system. We don't just win my case, we tear down the entire operation." Sheriff Reynolds launched his counter-offensive with brutal efficiency. First came additional charges against Jasmine, now accused of assaulting a deputy during her initial arrest, conspiracy to intimidate witnesses, and making terrorist threats. All fabricated, all designed to paint her as increasingly dangerous. Judge Harrington fast-tracked the expanded case, setting a trial date just 10 days away, an almost unprecedented acceleration clearly intended to handicap the defense's preparation. The message was clear. The Oakwood Springs power structure was fighting back with everything it had. Deputy Lisa Carter arrived at work to find herself suspended for policy violations discovered during a routine review. Her access to department records and evidence storage was immediately revoked. The timing, just hours after she had provided crucial documentation to Marcus, wasn't subtle. Mrs. Abernathy's condition deteriorated in the hospital, her doctors reporting stress-induced complications. Her family kept vigil at her bedside, while sheriff's deputies maintained a protective presence in the hallway, ostensibly for her security, but effectively monitoring all visitors. The prosecutor approached Jasmine with an unexpected offer: immediate freedom in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement about her arrest and detention conditions. "Walk away today," Prosecutor Bennett suggested during an unscheduled jail visit. "Drop all claims, agree never to discuss what happened, and this all disappears." Jasmine's response was characteristically measured. "I spent 17 years defending American principles of justice. I won't betray those principles now for personal comfort." When informed of this development, General Coleman didn't mince words with state officials. "If federal civil rights violations are being covered up in Oakwood Springs, the full weight of the Department of Justice will become involved. I've already briefed the Attorney General on this situation." His reputation and rank transformed this from a threat to a promise. Judge Harrington attempted to block any testimony about Jasmine's military service, claiming it irrelevant to current charges and potentially prejudicial to the court's perception. The transparent attempt to erase her distinguished record revealed the defense's strategy was working. Her military credibility directly contradicted the prosecution's portrayal of her character. Marcus's family received increasingly specific threats, forcing him to relocate his wife and children to a hotel under assumed names. Despite this personal attack, he intensified his efforts, working through nights preparing motions, reviewing evidence, and coordinating with Rodriguez on trial strategy. Eliza Chen's second major article hit like a bombshell, outlining financial connections between Sheriff Reynolds, Judge Harrington, and Oakwood detention partners. Using public records, banking information from whistleblowers, and statistical analysis, she painted a damning picture of a profit-driven justice system specifically targeting black travelers. The story spread nationally, drawing attention from civil rights organizations and federal authorities. Anonymous hackers released hundreds of sheriff department emails showing explicit racial profiling directives, arrest quotas categorized by race, and discussions about which highways were good fishing spots for targeting out-of-town travelers who wouldn't stay to fight charges. The department claimed the emails were altered but couldn't explain their authenticity markers. Sheriff Reynolds held an emergency press conference attacking Jasmine's character, citing her specialized killing training and hinting at classified incidents during her military service that raised serious concerns about her stability. The baseless insinuations backfired when military colleagues immediately came forward with accounts of Jasmine's exceptional judgment under pressure and numerous instances where she had protected civilian lives at personal risk. The defense filed an emergency motion for change of venue, citing the impossibility of a fair trial in Oakwood Springs, given the financial relationships between judicial officials and law enforcement. Judge Harrington denied the motion within hours without the customary review period, another procedural abnormality, adding to the growing list of appealable issues. Trevor Washington organized veterans into rotating shifts, maintaining a permanent presence outside the courthouse and detention center, silent, disciplined witnesses to the proceedings whose military bearing and decorations spoke volumes about which side of the conflict had honor. Their numbers grew daily as the story spread through veteran networks. Behind the scenes, FBI agents began quietly investigating Oakwood Springs' judicial system, reviewing patterns identified by Chen's reporting and conducting interviews with former defendants. The preliminary inquiry quickly expanded as evidence of systematic civil rights violations emerged. In detention, Jasmine developed a serious infection from her untreated handcuff injuries, spiking a fever that required hospitalization. The sheriff's department initially resisted medical transfer until Rodriguez obtained an emergency court order. At the hospital, medical staff documented evidence of neglect and mistreatment, adding to the growing case against the detention center's practices. Sheriff Reynolds attempted to limit hospital visitors to prevent documentation of Jasmine's condition, but military attorneys intervened with court orders ensuring access for her legal team and medical experts. General Coleman activated his plan to attend the trial personally, arranging for military transport to Oakwood Springs and briefing key Pentagon officials about the situation. His unprecedented personal involvement signaled the seriousness with which the military viewed the mistreatment of a decorated veteran. As the prosecution's case developed increasingly obvious cracks, several witnesses began recanting or modifying their testimony, sensing the shifting winds. Deputies who had provided nearly identical accounts of Jasmine's arrest suddenly remembered details differently when confronted with the possibility of perjury charges in a federal investigation. Throughout these developments, Jasmine maintained her strategic discipline, refusing pain medication in the hospital to ensure her mind remained sharp. In sniper training, she explained to Marcus during a bedside consultation, we learned that discomfort is temporary, but losing focus can be permanent. This is just another mission. Are you shocked by how far Sheriff Reynolds and Judge Harrington are willing to go to protect their corrupt system? Comment number 1 if you believe corruption like this exists in real communities across America, and hit that subscribe button to see how this intense confrontation continues to unfold. Would you have the courage to stand against an entire corrupt system like Jasmine? Or would you take the easy way out and accept the deal for immediate freedom? The real test of justice in Oakwood Springs is just beginning. What do you think will happen when a 4-star general enters this small-town courtroom? Stay with this story as we approach the dramatic courtroom showdown that will change Oakwood Springs forever. As Jasmine was returned to detention under guard, she noticed something subtle but significant. The deputies assigned to her transport treated her with newfound professionalism, avoiding eye contact and maintaining strict procedural correctness. The shift suggested word had spread through the department that this case had attracted powerful attention. The balance was beginning to shift, but Sheriff Reynolds had one final card to play, one that would transform this case from a local corruption matter to a national referendum on justice, race, and accountability in America's legal system. The Oakwood Springs courthouse had never seen anything like it. Television trucks lined Main Street. Journalists from national networks jostled with local reporters for position. A disciplined formation of veterans, now numbering over 50, stood at parade rest across from the building, many in dress uniforms displaying combat decorations. Inside, the gallery was packed beyond capacity, requiring bailiffs to enforce strict seating limits. Judge Harrington entered, looking visibly tense, his usual confident demeanor replaced with darting glances at the unusually full press section. The court recognizes unusual public interest in these proceedings. He began, clearing his throat. I'll remind everyone that this court will maintain absolute decorum regardless of external pressures. He proceeded to announce extraordinary restrictions on testimony, limiting character witnesses, excluding evidence of departmental patterns, and prohibiting any reference to unrelated civil rights concerns. Marcus and Rodriguez lodged formal objections to each restriction, methodically building a record for inevitable appeals. Prosecutor Bennett's opening statement portrayed Jasmine as a trained killer whose military experience made her more dangerous, not less. The defendant used specialized combat techniques to assault Mrs. Abernathy and subsequently resisted arrest with tactical precision, he claimed, his rhetoric growing increasingly desperate as he noticed several jurors glancing skeptically toward Jasmine's composed presence at the defense table. Marcus's opening was devastating in its simplicity. "This case isn't complex," he told the jury. "A decorated Marine with an impeccable record stopped to help an elderly woman who had fallen. For that act of kindness, she was arrested, injured, and charged with crimes that never occurred. The evidence will show not just her innocence, but a disturbing pattern of similar injustices motivated by profit and prejudice." The prosecution's first witness, Dr. Raymond Phillips, took the stand as their expert on veteran psychology. Under Rodriguez's blistering cross-examination, Phillips admitted he had never treated Jasmine, had no access to her military psychological evaluations, and received substantial consulting fees from the private detention company operating Oakwood Springs jail facilities. His testimony crumbled further when forced to acknowledge that his published papers on veteran instability had been rejected by major psychological journals for methodological flaws. Deputies testified next with clearly rehearsed statements, describing Jasmine's aggressive resistance, but these narratives collapsed under Marcus's cross-examination when he played recovered body cam footage showing Jasmine's calm compliance. The deputies' identical language suggested coordinated testimony, a point Marcus emphasized by having them read aloud from their suspiciously similar reports. The prosecution's case suffered another blow when Mrs. Abernathy's grandson, Michael, testified about his grandmother's actual account of the incident. "She told me repeatedly that Ms. Wilson was helping her after she fell," he stated firmly. "She also told me that sheriff's deputies visited her multiple times to help her remember correctly and threatened to investigate my business if she didn't cooperate with their version of events." When Sheriff Reynolds took the stand, his testimony began confidently but quickly deteriorated under cross-examination. "Sheriff, could you explain why your department receives increased federal funding based on arrest and conviction rates?" Marcus asked. "Objection!" Bennett shouted. "Irrelevant to current charges." "Sustained," Judge Harrington ruled quickly. Marcus pivoted seamlessly. "Sheriff, the recovered body cam footage shows Ms. Wilson clearly complying with orders while Mrs. Abernathy repeatedly states she was helping her. How do you reconcile this with your written report, claiming aggressive resistance?" Reynolds became visibly hostile. "Camera angles can be deceiving. My officers and I know a threat when we see one." "A threat," Marcus repeated, "from an unarmed woman helping an elderly citizen who had fallen. Military training makes ordinary actions potentially lethal," Reynolds insisted, his face reddening. "We responded appropriately to the threat assessment." "And would this threat assessment have been different if Ms. Wilson were white?" The courtroom erupted at Marcus's question. "Objection," Bennett shouted again. "Counselor is badgering the witness." "Withdrawn," Marcus replied calmly, but the question lingered in the air, its implication clear to everyone present. Deputy Lisa Carter's testimony came next, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. She methodically outlined the department's unofficial policies regarding racial profiling, arrest quotas categorized by race, and the financial incentives driving these practices. When Bennett attempted to discredit her as a disgruntled employee, she produced internal memos and emails supporting her claims, documents that had mysteriously disappeared from official records, but which she had personally archived. Technical. Expert Amir Khoury demonstrated conclusively that the body cam footage had been deliberately edited, to remove portions showing Jasmine helping Mrs. Abernathy and complying with officers. His presentation included metadata analysis, proving the edits occurred within the Sheriff's Department's evidence room. As the prosecution's case visibly crumbled, Judge Harrington made increasingly desperate attempts to limit damaging testimony, sustaining objections before they were even fully articulated and repeatedly admonishing the defense for irrelevant lines of questioning. The courtroom atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the racial dynamics of the case became impossible to ignore. Judge Harrington attempted to limit media access midway through proceedings, citing courtroom capacity concerns, a transparent effort to reduce public scrutiny that Rodriguez immediately challenged with First Amendment arguments. The turning point came midway through the third day, during a particularly damning cross-examination of a deputy who admitted under pressure that he had been instructed to embellish his report regarding Jasmine's behavior. As the deputy squirmed uncomfortably on the stand, the courtroom doors opened. General Marcus Coleman entered in full dress uniform, 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders, accompanied by 2 military aides. His timing was deliberate and the effect electric. The entire courtroom, including Judge Harrington, fell silent as the general took a seat directly behind the defense table. His presence sent an unmistakable message. The highest levels of the military were watching this proceeding with intense interest. The prosecution's remaining witnesses seemed to wilt under the general's stern gaze. Testimony became hesitant, assertions less certain. Several deputies began qualifying their statements with, "to the best of my recollection," and similar hedges. Sheriff Reynolds, watching from the prosecution table, realized his carefully constructed case was disintegrating. During an afternoon recess, he was observed attempting to contact several jurors through intermediaries, an action immediately reported to Marcus by courthouse staff, increasingly willing to expose misconduct as the power dynamics shifted. The defense caught the prosecution hiding exculpatory evidence, complete recordings of Mrs. Abernathy's initial statements at the scene, clearly stating Jasmine had been helping her. When confronted, Bennett claimed administrative oversight, but the pattern of concealed evidence was now too obvious to dismiss. Finally, Jasmine Wilson took the stand. In her simple dark suit, military posture perfect, she presented a stark contrast to the unstable, dangerous figure portrayed by the prosecution. She testified with measured precision about stopping to help Mrs. Abernathy, her calm compliance with officers despite their aggression, and the systematic mistreatment she witnessed in detention. Throughout aggressive cross-examination designed to provoke an emotional response, she maintained absolute composure, answering each question with military precision and refusing to be baited into anger or defensiveness. As the day ended with Jasmine still on the stand, the prosecution's case had visibly collapsed. Even Judge Harrington seemed to recognize the shifting momentum, his usual confident demeanor replaced with nervous glances toward General Coleman's imposing presence. In the corridor outside, Trevor Washington gathered the assembled veterans. "Tomorrow," he told them quietly, "tomorrow everything changes." None of them yet realized just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The fourth day of trial began with an unexpected presence. 3 FBI agents seated in the back row of the courtroom, their expressions neutral but their attention intense. Their arrival coincided with Eliza Chen's latest bombshell article, detailing financial records showing Sheriff Reynolds had received over $200,000 in unexplained deposits, correlating perfectly with increases in arrest rates. The timing was not coincidental. Judge Harrington entered looking visibly distressed, his usual confident stride replaced with tentative movements. As proceedings resumed with Jasmine still on the stand, an unexpected interruption came from the GI, prosecutor's table. "Your Honor," Bennett called out suddenly, "may we approach?" The whispered conference at the bench grew increasingly heated, with Judge Harrington shaking his head emphatically, while Bennett gestured toward the FBI agents. When they returned to their positions, the judge appeared distinctly unsettled. The morning's biggest surprise came from Oakwood Springs Memorial Hospital. Mrs. Abernathy, who had been unconscious for 2 days following a stress-induced stroke, had awakened and was insisting on testifying. Despite prosecution objections, Rodriguez quickly arranged for video testimony from her hospital room. The elderly woman's face, projected on the courtroom screen, appeared frail, but her eyes burned with determination. "I want to set the record straight," she began, her voice surprisingly strong. "That young lady was helping me after I fell. She was nothing but gentle and kind. Then those officers came and treated her terrible, just terrible. They pushed her around like she was nothing, ignored me when I tried to tell them what happened. Later they came to my house, told me I was confused about what I saw, that I should trust them to remember for me. Said they'd have to look into my grandson's business if I made trouble. I've been scared to speak up, but I can't let this injustice continue. That woman helped me and they punished her for it." Her testimony directly contradicted every element of the prosecution's case, coming from the very victim they claimed. Jasmine had assaulted. Bennett had no effective cross-examination strategy for an elderly white woman with no conceivable motive to lie in Jasmine's favor. As Mrs. Abernathy's testimony concluded, commotion erupted outside the courthouse. Sheriff Reynolds, apparently attempting to leave town, had been stopped at the county line by state police. Anonymous sources had tipped authorities that he was planning to flee to a non-extradition country. Inside the courtroom, Deputy Lisa Carter provided the final devastating evidence. Complete, unedited body cam footage she had secretly preserved, showing the entire interaction from multiple angles. The footage clearly showed Jasmine helping Mrs. Abernathy, the aggressive response of officers despite the elderly woman's protests, and Jasmine's calm compliance throughout. Technical analysis confirmed the footage was authentic and unaltered, in stark contrast to the edited versions previously provided by the Sheriff's Department. The prosecution's case, already crumbling, now completely collapsed. Bennett requested an urgent conference with the defense team during the lunch recess. "We're prepared to drop all charges immediately," he offered, his previous arrogance replaced with barely concealed panic. "Full dismissal, no conditions." "Not good enough," Rodriguez replied coolly. "We want dismissal with prejudice, public acknowledgement of Ms. Wilson's innocence, and full disclosure of departmental policies that led to this situation." When Bennett balked at these terms, Marcus added, "Those FBI agents aren't here by coincidence. Federal civil rights investigations don't end with a quiet dismissal. Your choices are narrowing by the hour." As proceedings resumed, Bennett rose to address the court. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the prosecution moves to dismiss all charges against the defendant." Judge Harrington, clearly sensing the shifting power dynamics, attempted one final assertion of control. "Motion denied," he declared, shocking the courtroom. "This court will see these serious charges through to verdict." Rodriguez was immediately on her feet. "Your Honor, the prosecution has moved to dismiss. With respect, the court lacks authority to force continuation of a case the state no longer wishes to pursue. This court has full discretion in matters of justice," Harrington insisted, his voice rising. "The trial will continue." The bizarre ruling sent murmurs through the gallery. Legal experts exchanged confused glances, a judge refusing prosecutions. Motion to dismiss was almost unprecedented and legally dubious. As this extraordinary legal drama unfolded, chaos erupted elsewhere in the courthouse as federal agents executed search warrants on the Sheriff's Department evidence room and Judge Harrington's chambers simultaneously. Documents were being secured, computers seized, staff interviewed. The courthouse had effectively become a federal crime scene even as the trial continued. Sensing disaster, Bennett requested another conference with the judge. Their whispered conversation at the bench grew increasingly heated, with Bennett clearly trying to convince Harrington to accept the dismissal. When they separated, both men looked shaken. Meanwhile, Trevor organized veterans to form a protective cordon around Marcus and his family as they moved between courthouse and hotel, a visible demonstration of solidarity that attracted significant media attention. Eliza Chen's reporting had gone national, with major networks now covering the case and its implications for justice systems nationwide. Her methodical exposure of Oakwood Springs practices was drawing scrutiny to similar patterns in other jurisdictions. As afternoon sessions began, Sheriff Reynolds was brought into the courthouse in handcuffs by federal agents. a stunning visual that sent shockwaves through the community. Several deputies, seeing the writing on the wall, began approaching federal authorities to negotiate cooperation agreements. More victims of the department's racial profiling practices came forward, describing nearly identical experiences to Jasmine's. Routine traffic stops or minor interactions escalated to serious charges, pressure to accept plea deals, financial devastation from bail and legal fees. The pattern Chen had uncovered was being confirmed by dozens of individual stories. Judge Harrington, watching his carefully constructed world disintegrate, made a desperate final attempt to salvage the situation. This court declares a mistrial due to improper influence and media contamination, he announced abruptly. All jurors are dismissed. New proceedings will be scheduled with appropriate controls to ensure justice. Rodriguez was immediately on her feet. Your Honor, we strenuously object to this ruling and will seek immediate review from higher courts. The defense has committed no misconduct, and the prosecution has moved to dismiss all charges. This appears to be an unprecedented attempt to prevent the conclusion of a case that has exposed serious misconduct. Before Harrington could respond, the courtroom doors opened. A distinguished older man in judicial robes entered, accompanied by federal marshals. Judge Samuel Richardson, Federal District Court, he announced formally. I have emergency orders, superseding local jurisdiction in this matter, based on evidence of civil rights violations and judicial misconduct. These proceedings are now under federal supervision. As Judge Richardson approached the bench, General Coleman rose from his seat. The four-star general's imposing presence drew all eyes as he moved to stand beside Jasmine at the defense table. The moment crystallized the extraordinary nature of what was unfolding, the highest levels of military and federal judicial authority converging to address an injustice against a single black veteran in a small southern town. Judge Harrington, his face ashen, slowly removed his judicial robe and exited the courtroom without another word. The system of injustice he had helped construct and maintain for years had finally, spectacularly collapsed. Outside, news helicopters circled above the courthouse as crowds gathered, sensing that history was being made in Oakwood Springs. Inside, Jasmine Wilson stood perfectly straight, her military bearing intact, watching as justice, delayed but not denied, finally began to unfold. All rise. The federal courtroom fell silent as Judge Samuel Richardson took the bench. The scene was extraordinary. National media packed the gallery, federal officials lined the walls, and General Marcus Coleman sat prominently behind the defense table where Jasmine Wilson stood with perfect military posture. Before addressing the matters at hand, Judge Richardson began, I want to acknowledge the exceptional circumstances that have brought us here. This court has reviewed the evidence and finds a disturbing pattern of civil rights violations, judicial misconduct, and systemic racism that demands immediate remedy. His first order dismissed all charges against Jasmine with prejudice, ensuring they could never be refiled. Ms. Wilson, he continued, this court extends its sincere apologies for the injustice you have endured. Your rights were violated at every level of the local justice system, and your dignity assaulted despite your distinguished service to this nation. As Judge Richardson detailed the federal investigation's preliminary findings, systematic racial profiling, falsified evidence, quota-based arrests targeting black travelers, General Coleman requested permission to address the court. The judge nodded with respect to the four-star general. Coleman approached the bench, his decorated uniform a powerful visual reminder of the military's highest values. Your Honor, I speak today not only for myself, but for the United States military. Jasmine Wilson served our nation with extraordinary courage, integrity, and skill. She participated in classified operations that saved countless American lives. Her treatment by Oakwood Springs law enforcement represents not just a miscarriage of justice, but a betrayal of the principles she risked her life to defend. He turned to face Jasmine directly. Master Sergeant Wilson, on behalf of the country you served with such distinction, I offer a formal apology for the injustice you have endured. No American, especially not one who has sacrificed as you have, should ever face such treatment based on the color of their skin. The courtroom remained absolutely silent as the general's words hung in the air. A historic moment when one of the military's highest-ranking officers publicly acknowledged racial injustice against a black veteran. For the first time since her arrest, Jasmine Wilson spoke publicly. Her voice, clear and measured, carried throughout the courtroom. "I accepted long ago that wearing a uniform doesn't shield black Americans from prejudice. What happened to me in Oakwood Springs happens to people who look like me across this country every day. Most without the resources, connections, or training I was fortunate to have. I stand here not just for myself, but for every person of color who has been profiled, falsely arrested, pressured to plead guilty to crimes they didn't commit, or treated as inherently suspicious because of their skin color. This isn't about one corrupt sheriff or one biased judge. It's about systems designed to perpetuate injustice while creating the illusion of law and order." Her words resonated far beyond the courtroom as live broadcasts carried them nationwide. Within hours, the Department of Justice announced a comprehensive investigation of Oakwood Springs law enforcement, expanding to examine similar patterns in surrounding jurisdictions. Former Judge Harrington faced a judicial review board where his systematic favoritism, financial connections to the private prison industry, and pattern of discriminatory rulings were examined in excruciating detail. Sheriff Reynolds and 7 deputies were indicted on multiple federal charges, including civil rights violations, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and corruption. In the aftermath, Jasmine established the Wilson Justice Foundation to provide legal resources for veterans facing discrimination and wrongful prosecution. The organization quickly expanded to assist all victims of systemic injustice, with particular focus on travelers arrested in jurisdictions with quota-based policing practices. Marcus Jackson, thrust into the national spotlight by the case, became a prominent civil rights attorney, specializing in exposing systematic discrimination in rural justice systems. His firm, funded in part by Jasmine's foundation, began investigating similar patterns in counties across the southern United States. An unexpected friendship blossomed between Jasmine and Mrs. Abernathy, whose courage in speaking truth despite intimidation had helped break the case open. The elderly woman became a vocal advocate against racial profiling, often remarking, "At my age, I've seen too much injustice to stay silent anymore." Deputy Lisa Carter, recognized for her moral courage in exposing departmental misconduct, was appointed interim sheriff with a mandate to completely reform the department. Her first acts included implementing body cameras with strict preservation protocols, establishing community oversight boards with significant representation from people of color, and creating new hiring practices to build a more diverse department. Across the country, Trevor Washington and fellow veterans established the Watch Guard program, trained observer teams monitoring treatment of minority veterans in the justice system. Their silent, disciplined presence in courtrooms became a powerful deterrent against judicial and prosecutorial misconduct in cases involving veterans of color. Eliza Chen's methodical investigative reporting earned her the Pulitzer Prize and spawned similar investigations in dozens of jurisdictions nationwide. Her work revealed that Oakwood Springs practices, while egregious, were not unique. Similar patterns existed in countless small towns using law enforcement as revenue generation, systems that disproportionately targeted minorities. At the Pentagon, General Coleman established a military-wide program addressing racial bias, both within the armed forces and in treatment of veterans. The program, named Wilson Initiative in Jasmine's honor, provided resources for veterans facing discrimination and training for military leadership on recognizing and addressing systemic racism. 1 year after her arrest, Jasmine Wilson stood in front of the reformed Oakwood Springs Police Department, now led by Chief Lisa Carter. Before her stood the department's newest recruits, a diverse class including Black, Latino, and Asian, officers alongside white colleagues, all committed to a transformed vision of policing. "Your badge is not a shield against accountability," Jasmine told them as they prepared to take their oaths. "It is a promise to protect all citizens equally, to recognize your own biases, and to have the moral courage to stand against injustice, even when it wears the same uniform you do." As the new officers raised their hands to swear their oaths, Jasmine Wilson, once handcuffed and humiliated for an act of kindness in this very town, administered the oath herself, completing a transformation from victim to reformer, from target to leader, from symbol of injustice to architect of change. What happened in Oakwood Springs had begun with one woman's wrongful arrest, but expanded into a national reckoning with systemic racism in small-town justice systems. The case became required study in law schools, police academies, and military leadership courses. A powerful reminder that true justice requires constant vigilance, moral courage, and the willingness to challenge systems, not just individuals. Has this story affected how you view the American justice system? Comment below with your thoughts on systemic racism in law enforcement, and share if you believe stories like Jasmine's need wider attention. Like and subscribe if you want to see more content exposing injustice and celebrating those brave enough to stand against it. Thank you for joining me for this powerful true story of courage, injustice, and transformation. Together we can build a more just world where no one faces discrimination because of the color of their skin. Jasmine Wilson's story offers profound lessons about justice in America. First, it reveals how racism can be institutionalized within legal systems, creating profit-driven incentives that disproportionately target people of color. Second, it demonstrates the power of strategic coalition building, how veterans, journalists, whistleblowers, and community members can unite against entrenched corruption. Third, it highlights how documentation and evidence collection are crucial weapons against systemic discrimination. Fourth, it shows that individuals with privilege or specialized skills have a responsibility to use their advantages to create change that benefits those without such resources. Fifth, it illustrates that moral courage often comes with significant personal risk, yet remains essential for justice. Sixth, it proves that true reform requires transforming entire systems, not merely punishing individuals. Most importantly, Jasmine's experience reminds us that racial profiling affects Black Americans regardless of their service or contributions to society. Yet it also offers hope by demonstrating that through persistence, strategic thinking, and collective action, even deeply entrenched systems of injustice can be successfully challenged and ultimately transformed. What moments in this story resonated most deeply with you? Have you or someone you know ever experienced racial profiling or witnessed systemic discrimination in your community? Comment below with your thoughts on how we can build more accountable justice systems that serve everyone equally. If you believe stories like Jasmine's deserve wider attention, please share this video to help raise awareness about these critical issues. Would you have had the courage to stand up like Deputy Carter did, risking your career to expose corruption? Or like Mrs. Abernathy, speaking truth despite intimidation? Hit that like button if you believe in the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change, and subscribe to join our community dedicated to exposing injustice and celebrating those brave enough to stand against it. Thank you for witnessing this powerful journey of courage, resilience, and transformation. Together, we can build a world where justice truly is blind to the color of one's skin.